So, hey, how you doing?
Well, they unmuted.
Hello.
Are you able to turn your camera on?
Yeah. Is it not on? Let's see.
In the window, there's a little box where on the bottom left, turn on camera, and then there's a little drop down if it's. Oh, there you go. Hey, what's up, Charles? How are you doing? Oh, I'm not worried. I'm good. So welcome. Are you guys live on YouTube, or are you just like you do these pre-recorded, or?
We do live on YouTube, but when we're doing our show. When we do our show, we're not live on YouTube right now.
Oh, all right. Fair enough. Well, then, then everybody welcome. Could you go ahead and introduce yourselves? I think you guys, it seems like you guys saw the panel that we did and you were like, hey, there's more nuance here. I want to have a discussion where like maybe we can pick apart some of these because there's kind of one political wing that's being represented in the panel that we did. And you maybe want to, maybe some challenges, maybe some bridges, maybe some critiques, whatever that may be, is kind of like an impetus for this conversation. But like before that, like I'd love for you guys to just like say who you are, like what it is that you're about, like, and where, and also where people can find you.
Real quick, Scott, can you just change the not show?
Yeah, you're delayed.
All right, so my name is Angelo Cummings. I'm a transsexual man. I transitioned back in 2003 when there was hardly no one transitioning. It was pretty rare, and in that quest, I decided to make it my mission to educate. Since I'm a medical professional, I'm an occupational therapist, retired, but at the time I was still working. And I thought it was very important to educate people because there's a lot of, hearsay, and it's always good to bring out information, truth, and try to educate people. Yeah, and my name is Lynna Cummings, and we married back in 2015, and I transitioned back in 2013. So not as long as Mark, but we found each other on Facebook after I had been transitioned like for just only a year, and then I had a really tragic accident. I came to visit him in New Mexico at the time where he was living, and basically rolled my car because I had driven too far, too long, and we met at an ICU in El Paso, Texas.
Wait, was he your occupational therapist?
He was.
Oh, dude, that's like that's dope. That's like a fucking like a kismet situation. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. He helped me to heal because I had like broken my neck and back. Literally, was like given a 25% chance to recover. And we fell in love after all that. We had barely even known each other, but that really brought us together. And after that, we started, just talking about trans issues because he had a show since 2012, was it? Yeah. Transition radio show's been on since 2012. I interviewed people from all over the world, transsexuals, detransitioners. I mean, I've been interviewing detransitioners before detransition was even a word. Really? So
yeah, and people that were desisting from their transition, I think was how it was before people like kind of gave the moniker detrans, correct?
Yeah, and it was like they didn't know what to do because it was like one of those things that nobody even understood. Like, you're doing what? You can't do that. That kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think detrans people, especially, apart from like the society, the culture, the community, putting all of the social concerns aside, right? And which is obviously monumental, just from a medical perspective, like as trans people, you're kind of in uncharted territory in terms of like, endocrinology and things like that. But as far as detrans people are concerned, like you're in the fucking unknown, right? Like nobody knows what long-term effects are really. Nobody knows like what hormones you should or shouldn't be on, how to get it. Because I mean, like if you're a detrans person, you know, presuming you would like to fully desist, you know, let's say phenotypically, right? Fully desist so that you look as the original sex or gender that you were, you know, a lot of these people can't go back on testosterone or estrogen, like it, or, you know what I mean? Like they have to continue their treatments or, you know, so it really is a wild thing. Like I said, apart from the social context.
I wanted to add that, when we got together and we met, I began detransitioning because I figured, well, I wanted her kids back in her life. And I thought, well, maybe if I detransition, they don't see me as a threat. So in 2015, I was probably one of the very few beginning of the detransitioners as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it wasn't easy. And I was just like, I can't do this. You know, it's just like, there's no way after being on hormones since 2003, all the changes, the balding, I mean, it's just the voice, you know, it's like, there's just no way.
When you said that you wanted to detransition because of, to be able to get her children back in your life, like, can you, I mean, if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, I totally understand, but can you like, can we piece that out a little bit more? Like some of the complexity? Cause like I wasn't going to bring up your children in any way, shape or form, but it seems like there are people on Twitter and things like that, without naming names, cause I don't think it would be appropriate, right? That are like, oh, you know, you don't have your children in your life, blah, blah, blah. If you could maybe like explain how that impacted your life, what that means, and like pick that apart so we can just have like a kind of tabula rasa blank slate for you to kind of like say what that means. So maybe we have a better understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love to share that information. I was raised in a very straightforward, conservative Christian family. So I was raised to not do anything like this. I mean, my dad would have criticized me if I had earrings in high school or something, or long hair, you know. I mean, it was that strict. We're both Latin American descent, so machismo is a huge thing to that community and stuff. And
well, just tell them you're Marianismo now.
Yeah, right. No, but it was very difficult. I knew when I transitioned that it was going to be very difficult to keep my children in my life, because religion, Christianity, the rules, you know, are how they are. Yeah. So
and basically,
you can't break those rules.
Her wife, at the time his wife, because it was a he, told him, leave quietly, I'll take care of this. So literally got kicked out. There was just no conversation, no understanding, no anything. She wasn't allowed to see the kids. Right. She took full custody of the kids completely. And it was just like, you're non-existent. We don't, because his ex didn't want, or her ex, this is very confusing, didn't want, you know, the kids to deal with anything. You could tell the story.
So quickly, we have discovered the power of the word they. Boys, just say they. When I say boys, I'm talking to chat. Like, just sometimes it's just better to say they, and when this shit starts getting confusing.
Right? Yeah.
But we're not like politically correct or anything. No. I mean, I'm not making any kind of grandiose statement and saying, "Oh, I am a woman." You know, it's like, I'm a transsexual. I transitioned because I have gender dysphoria. He transitioned. He was born a female, and biologically, we both are what we are. We can't change that. But the fact is that I lost my children after that, specifically after the accident, because I couldn't really fight for them anymore, because I couldn't go to the courthouse anymore. I was like, you know, I was healing. So I was focusing on survival, and the concept of like, oh, you just abandon your kids. It's like, I have always wanted my kids to reach out, to be able to have a communication with them. But I also realized the limitations of how I even brought them up, you know, to have those Judeo-Christian values. And I'm like an anti, to all of that.
So let's fast forward because it's like dragging on. So
yeah, it's fine. I've got all the time in the world. I don't know how long you guys have, but I'm a Twitch streamer. Like we do marathons over here.
Hours and hours.
Hours and hours. So I detransition in hopes that, well, maybe they won't see me as a threat, because it's like, okay, dad became a transsexual and then marries a trans guy, and it's like, well, let me detransition, and I was raised Jehovah's Witness, so there's a lot of religious craziness in my upbringing as well, and a lot of guilt and shame, first for being a lesbian, then, then I became a trans guy. And so that whole religiosity really plays a role in your psyche and in your self-worth and a whole different thing. So I figure detransition would be it. No. And I probably hold the world's record. I detransitioned 6 times. And every time I detransition, it's like, I can't do this. This is who I am right here. I mean, I looked worse than, a truck driver in a dress, wearing wigs, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work I felt like dying. I mean, people don't understand the angst when you're trying to walk this earth as something that you don't feel comfortable as.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, you have these younger transitioners that detransition, and the effects of the testosterone isn't quite as apparent as it is with him, and then they say, well, I stopped and the tea was doing me damage, and I'm just going to move along with my life. And for the most part, a lot of them can, because they have not lost their femininity. And this person, obviously, he tried, he gave it his best shot 6 times. And that was because of that religious, compulsion of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I being what, God wants me to be, living in the gender that I'm supposed to live in as the Bible says. And, it just didn't work out, so it just wasn't authentic.
I reviewed some of your guys' content. Obviously, as a strict libertarian, there are places where I agree with you guys and I disagree with the conservatives, and there are places where I strongly disagree with you guys. But it seems from both your conversation now and like your content, that kind of the main impetus that you feel is a kind of a limiting factor to trans freedom and things of that nature is kind of the religious conservative traditional impulses towards ideas of a strict, I wouldn't say biological gender binary. I think even gender binary is a bit, like implies that there's like the spectrum, even in that language, but regardless, it seems like the religiosity is like a really big thing that you guys that played a almost a negative role in your life, and you feel is something that you fear in some of the conservative movements. I tried to bring this up a little bit when I did that panel, and like Blair White shut me down real quick, and like other people like kind of shut me down as I was, I brought up the Texas bill where you're legally an adult at 18. And yet you can't have access to endocrinology or medicine until 21. And I was like, there's a disconnect here, right? Like if this is about minors and things like that, and this seems like the early rumblings to me of, this is a really complicated issue, right? Like I think it's extremely complicated issue. And what I see is conservatives waking up to a lot of the critical theory that is deeply involved in the left, that is against heteronormativity, that hates cisgender for being at the top of the hierarchy of gender structures. And they're waking up to corruption in the government from these, corruption in education and schools, because there's this ideology that is antithetical to theirs. And it seems like there's this reaction of burn it all down. And I'm worried about that swing.
I want to interject. I mean, the schools right now, I have a sister of mine who actually is a counselor and works for the school system, and I have a lot of friends.
A guidance counselor?
Yeah. And, what happens is it's like for many years, gays, lesbians, and the new kids on the block, trans, have been ridiculed, have had to hide, have had to deal with violence, shaming, and everything else. So it's almost like all that pushing that the conservative religious right have done to keep us quiet, to keep us hidden, to make us seem like the most evil, demonic things that walk this earth, has now, the pendulum has crossed, and it's like the schools are trying to protect the kids. I think it all started with good intent. We can't say, well, there's this like massive conspiracy of these like really pedos and freaky people that want to get at your kids. And I think that's it's like rumors and conspiracy, and not to say that everyone has good intent, but it started out with good intent to try to protect and help and educate, and and what is it?
My cat wants attention, and like, so he'll intentionally fuck up my green screen to get attention.
Yeah, I was gonna say he just opened up a portal.
Yes, he did.
Sorry.
I believe that's where that all started. It's like now people are trying to protect, because I know when I grew up, when I was different, got made fun of. You had no one you could talk to. You can talk to your parents. There was nobody there to really, because being gay, being a lesbian was wrong. I knew from the time that I was young that I was different, the way I walked, the way I talked. But there was no role models, nobody there to guide us, to help us, to give us some sort of like, hey, it's going to be okay. And I think that's where, and then you get the right, it's trying to twist this as some evil plan to come take your children and cut off their genitals. And that's not happening. That's not the truth at all.
I would say that there's some truth to it. But I don't think it is an evil plan, right? What I think is that you have philosophy, and philosophy informs culture and politics. And there is some poisonous, very, I would say from my perspective, very evil philosophy that is in critical theory, that is in critical gender theory, that is in these things. So for example, Gail Rubin, right? Like she kind of started the critical gender theory kind of aspect in a lot of ways. And in there is very pro-pedophilic language. It's got over 4,000 citations. You look at David Evans, where he says that, without the abuses of this ideology of the right, societies used to have 6 and 8-year-olds that were sexually active, and this is a great thing. More research with over 1,200 citations. And so I think it's very much like the Catholic Church is kind of the way that I look at it, is that when you have something, sorry, I was getting picked up. Oh, I'm getting picked up on your mic. It sounds like there's an echo.
We just have an air conditioner turned on.
Oh, maybe it's on my end. Sorry. But it went away, so we're good. But when you have a place where the lines are vague, right? Where rules kind of go away, and where you're crossing into the unknown, there are people that there are predators that will utilize that. I think the conservative sees things like drag queen story hour, and there are predators that have been in those places, and there are people that are probably well-meaning, though it's deeply against conservative values, and I think a little bit inappropriate, or more than a little bit inappropriate. I don't think that's the right way to engage in this. But I would say that there is a danger of coming after your children, but I don't think it's that. When I look at transformative social emotional learning, for example, and I look at them asking for a critical democracy that's anti-capitalist and anti-individualist and things like that, there is a movement that is clearly designed to attack and target your children's ideas and philosophy into a leftist philosophy that has some predators in it, but that is not what the trans community is, but is also grooming your children into a political ideology. And both of these things are terrifying to the right. Obviously, they should be terrifying to everybody, but especially the right. And so when I look at that, I go, well, yeah, there's some truth to it. And this is where I fear the right-wing pendulum swift, because parsing out all that philosophy, finding the bad parts, separating from like what we can do to help people and not help people is going to be far more difficult than burning down the systems and simply saying, trans people are coming for your kids. Let's fucking deny them everything. And let's use our state power because this group is fucked up.
And that's what they're doing. And that's, you know, that's what scares us. And that's what it's like. We're not about transing children. Like I said, I don't even believe that that's even, kids are put on blockers. And I don't believe that every child should, you know, because not everyone is trans. I mean, I've seen since the time I transitioned such a massive like swing of like all of a sudden we were this small group. Now all of a sudden there's like a whole bunch of people growing in number. You know, you got the rapid onset gender dysphoria that just all of a sudden, just like out of nowhere came, and these girls never had an inkling of having gender dysphoria, of being different. They were neurodivergent. They had all sorts of like Asperger, autism, learning disabilities, all sorts of different things. And we could blame
ADHD, OCD.
Yeah, we could blame the chemicals, endocrine disrupting chemicals,
obsessive disorders, right? Like it's obsessive disorders, like people, some form of disability or neurodivergent behavior that causes individuals to become attached to a single thing strongly. And there's multiple disorders that fit that kind of that pathology.
When I was working as an occupational therapist, I saw the rise in autistic kids. And, you know, the mothers would bring these kids and like, he was normal 1 minute. And after certain inoculations and things, boom, not normal anymore and having all these issues, eye contact problems and all sorts of stuff. Being
on Twitch, I have to say that we're not engaged in any medical misinformation here, and that there is no evidence to support the idea that thimerosal and mercury in the MMR vaccine or anything else causes autism. Please continue. I have to protect my channel.
Yeah, I hear you. But, you know, I started seeing a lot of that, and I was like, something's going on here, because I'm very analytical. I'm in the Asperger spectrum myself. So all of a sudden, I started seeing a rise with these gender-confused teens, and it's like, but, you know, I would talk to the mothers, and they were like, but they never showed anything. You know, like, from the moment I came out of my mother's womb, they're like, oh, no, she's going to be a lesbian, because I was really butchy, very, you know, like, I look like a truck driver in a dress.
Well, yeah,
So
I mean,
girls,
Buck Angel talks about this a lot too, right? Which is that the medical community and the corruption from philosophy that has infected, you know, pharmaceutical companies and hospitals that see the biggest fucking cash cow they've ever seen, which is these surgeries and medications that are essentially permanent. You know, I mean, like you can detrans early and, you know, not need an endocrinologist for the rest of your life. But if you maintain it for 4 or 5 years, you're going to need to see an endocrinologist for the rest of your life. But setting that aside, Buck Angel talks a lot about, you know, persistent gender dysphoria, which is something that just magically disappeared out of the literature. Is there used to be this idea of like, you have a 2-year-old that says I'm a boy. And at 3, they say I'm a boy. And at 4, they say I'm a boy. And at 5, they say I'm a boy. And at 10, it's causing them severe distress because they keep saying, I'm a fucking boy. And I've been saying this basically since I was old enough to fucking speak. And now what we have is like no focus on that as anything different, as anything separate, as anything we should focus on. Instead, we have a medical community that goes, oh yeah, well, if someone says that they are, then that must be what they are. You have these gender abolitionists that say that like, oh no, it's, you know, if they say they're a boy, then that's what they are. That's what they want to be. And it's like, so throw them on some Lupron. It's like, the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, like back in 2015, Mark and I did a video, and I linked it to you, talking about how we were concerned about the dangers of Lupron and puberty blockers. And Fourth Wave Now, or one of the feminist blogs, picked it up, and they heralded it as being brave to talk about such a thing, because back in 2015, nobody was talking about this stuff. You know, Lupron was a rejected drug. It had already been, you know, the company Taft that had invented it or some had been sued for its usage, and there's a lot of controversy with Lupron. But, you know, the pharmaceutical industry is not just in the trans medicine industry. They're all over your television, and they're selling you things that you don't need on a daily basis, 24 hours a day.
With side effects.
With side effects, telling you that it's
Yeah.
going to create suicidal ideation. I mean, where is the outcry and the uproar about the pharmaceutical industry and the loosey-goosey ways of the medical industrial complex? And we know that ever since medicine has been medicine in this country, that it has been utilized as a cash cow for petrochemical companies making their pills, and also making people dependent and needing of pharmaceuticals, you know. So it's not just the trans medicine issue.
Where's the uproar on kids that were diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and prescribed Ritalin? Because no one could handle the kids in the classroom or anywhere, so it's like, here, medicate them, dumb them down.
Oh, you're speaking of one.
Make them
I had facial tics from Adderall for like probably 2 or 3 years, where like I couldn't stop doing this. And eventually I grew out of it from years of being off of Adderall. But like Adderall fucked me up because like it was like, oh, you're a problem child. You have ADHD.
Yeah.
And like really, I mean, like I do have some mild ADHD for sure, but mostly I was just fucking bored. I was just bored because school was too fucking easy. You know,
I used to daydream. I mean, I was never put on anything, but I couldn't sit still. It was like, this is boring. I got to go do something else, you know, that kind of thing. But people are not, you know, they're not getting their knickers in a wad about all that other stuff. But it's just this trans thing, because what they don't understand, you know,
It's
they
what
want
they demonize.
Well,
So it's like,
so
yeah,
I would say this, right? From a libertarian perspective, this is where I tend to align with the conservatives. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of children's rights, parents don't own children, right? But the community doesn't own children either. And the school has no say over a child's life more so than a parent. The reason I would say is that parents are the default guardians of children. And what that means is just like a guardian of a will, right? You are a guardian of the emergent will of an emergent adult that is yet to be able to fully express their will, because a child can't consent. And I would say child, I know I saw one video where you had taken issue with the usage of the word child on teenagers, and you like described your grandmother and things like that. But as far as I'm concerned, I think of 19 and 20-year-olds as children, as far as I'm concerned. I think age of consent is too fucking low, personally. But nevertheless, I look at
it depends on the times. You know, we're living, like my grandmother got married at 16. There's a lot of young women that get married and have a family. At 13, I knew exactly what I was doing. We had a
yeah, I mean, like,
one,
for sure.
You know,
but I would say, I would say that unless a child is able to win emancipation, right, then their guardian is kind of there to protect the ideas of consent, to protect the ideas of what, you know, who they are, what it is that they would want. I would say that any form of permanent physical damage to the body and any form of permanent psychological damage is neglect and or child abuse. And so when I look at trans teens, I don't see enough evidence in any way, shape, or form. And honestly, no amount of evidence would matter to me. I would say that you're dealing with someone that's not an adult, and permanent changes to their body or their physicality should not be allowed. Now, the moment they turn 18, I'm cool with it. This I think this is something that we have a bit of a disagreement on.
Okay, let me ask you this. What if that teenager is living with disgruntled parents who beat him up because too feminine of a boy or too masculine of a girl? They're religious. They don't let them get on the phone anymore, on the computer. They're making their life a living hell. This teen is like dysphoric and just like, I can't stand this anymore. You know, he goes to the school and he reports what's happening, you know, and parents are abusive. So if you got a bunch of a-hole parents, who's going to protect you from those a-hole parents? And I think that's where the school has stepped in.
Well, I don't mind the school stepping in there, because you just described an abusive parent. And so that's no longer being a proper guardian. They no longer have a right to those children. What I would say is that doesn't justify medical transition as far as I'm concerned.
And you know what? The whole concept of medical transition, it doesn't of transition at all doesn't necessarily involve medical intervention.
Agreed. I'm all for social transition.
Right? Okay, so if they're socially transitioning, and this one Twitter account that recently blocked me because of my opinions and bringing up my family inappropriately as well, just to shoot
Oh
me
yeah.
down.
Fucking.
Right.
Look, I know
Okay.
Twitch loves drama and everything. You know, she seems like a sweet girl to me. It seems like y'all had a lot of back and forth. Let's not get in the drama. Let's get into the issues.
So anyway, this person, they were allowed at 11 years of age to have an Instagram account, to go surfing around, to be on the internet 24 hours a day, whatever she wanted to do. And she, along with so many other of these young, impressionable kids, they get into this hive-minded activity of like constantly like looking things up, and then there's like creating things and then talking about it, and then before you know it, everybody wants to transition. And it's like, it becomes like this social contagion, which is what rapid onset gender dysphoria is all about, you know, because prior they had never been very masculine presenting. They were, you know, feminine in their appearance and stuff, and they never really, you know, had, maybe they were a little tomboyish, you know, but it wasn't like that extreme. But then they get into this, and then typically it's those that have those neurodivergent issues, you know, that are all obsessed and caught up, and then before you know it,
Well, they're caught up in the
talking
ideology.
people-
It's the gender
Yeah,
ideology.
well,
It's critical gender theory,
they're-
right? I mean, you have an onslaught from activists that are in schools, that are in the highest levels of education, that are working within the United Nations under UNESCO, from an academic perspective. That is, you know, it's just a rebranding of Marxism, right? I mean, critical race theory is the same thing. Critical legal studies is the same thing. Critical theory is the same thing from the Frankfurt School. It's just taking elements of Marxism, of the superposition and oppressed oppressor, et cetera, and anti-capitalism, anti-individualism, et cetera, and then just repackaging those things into different cultural institutions. We're assaulted. I think our kids are being assaulted, but from multiple angles, with a philosophy that is pernicious, and I think definitely damaging to a certain subset of the population.
But there's some of that, but also I believe that they egg themselves on. They find out information. Not all of them are coerced by some adult transsexual, which is the mantra that.
Oh no, I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'm not saying they're all like
Because it's
specifically
some-
groomed
some-
by an individual on like a Discord server,
Right.
though that does happen, right? Like we know that
It
some
does.
trans people talk about eggs and like how to crack an egg and things like that.
But that happens in the whole pedophilia type of thing where they go after kids and whatever. So this is something that's been done forever. But transsexuals, you know, they're being painted as groomers, pedophiles. I mean, even in that Twitter thing, I mean, we've been called every name in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, seriously, people. You know, I'm a 58-year-old human being. You
Right.
know, I had
52.
my life hasn't been, you know, like that easy, but you know, here I am, and we're not some evil individuals that are trying to take your kids and have their parts cut out and whatever else. I mean,
Well, I think
my
it's social
whole-
media in general, right? Not just its effect on the children, but its effect on politics and adults.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, social media represents already everyone involved in social media actively already represents a kind of, we'll say, extroverted kind of bias, right? People that want to socially engage with other people. And then it is the most pernicious, the most volatile, and the loudest voices that the algorithms bring to us. And so the representations that you see of the, I don't like calling it the trans community. I don't know what the best phrase is, because I don't know a town in America that's trans town. I don't see Transylvania except in one place, and that's not what it's known for, right? But you get what I'm saying. Like there's a subset of the population that is this identity, and what you have is the media, social media, you know, schools, specifically colleges, right here, universities, they love activist-minded individuals that are pushing a philosophy that is rebranded Marxism, and that is what most conservatives see. And then they see libs of TikTok, and they see the worst examples of teachers they've been groomed, let's be honest, by their college professors into an ideology that is insane. And what they don't see is that the typical trans person, transsexual, however you want to say it, is someone that just desperately wants to blend in.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we do on a everyday basis.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it really bothers me, because when I transitioned back in 2003, I became a fierce advocate to educate and help people understand this so we wouldn't get ridiculed, make fun of, and the violence and all that stuff. And what I'm seeing now is just, it's crazy. It's just, you know, being demonized. You know, it feels like we're going to go back to where we started. And that worries me, because some good people try to do some good work to get us, you know, into at least like, hey, they're okay individuals. You know, they might be a little strange, but they're okay individuals. To now being, you know, worried that some crazy person is going to try to attack us because they see us as some Baphomet, you know, or some weird, evil children kidnapper, whatever thing.
But, you know, just like there is a Marxist element to what's going on in this world with regards to critical race theory and all the things we've been talking about, there is also, you know, I mean, Netflix came out with the family about Republican, you know, motivations and policy people that are in place, and think tanks that are working behind the scenes on the Twitter, on your TikTok, doing things to influence your vote this November. And one of those things that is up for election is the issue of gender affirming care and getting the ire of conservatives up to a level where they're going to vote. They're going to go to the polls because they want to enact more transgender, you know, anti-trans legislation. They want to prohibit things like Alabama did. And, you know, so these are things that are being done. And our concern is that detransitioners are being used by the right-wing party to influence the public square that's on Twitter and that's on these social media sites. And it's part of the game, right?
So can I so looking at the political field here, my question is then, maybe we can parse out where your issues lie a little better here. So obviously the Texas and Alabama situations are ones that you would be against, but what about Parental Rights and Education Bill HB 1557 in Florida?
The Don't Say quote unquote gay bill that they...
Yeah, the media called it the Don't Say Gay Bill, yeah.
Gay bill, yeah. You know, DeSantis is, you know, heavily against, you know, a lot of, I mean, you could see a lot of the stuff that he's doing right now. And I find it a little bit worrisome at times. I mean, it affects how people, like we had a guest, was it last night or the night before? A couple of nights ago, who has had to revamp her entire program because she can't say certain things now. You know, it's almost like fascist. You know,
but it wasn't like she was saying it to students.
Right.
She was talking to the educators.
Yeah, she was educating the educators on certain things. She had to curtail that completely. So it's like they're changing.
But if we look at the Don't Say Gay Bill or Parental Rights in Education, HB 1557, is there any provision? Because I look at that bill and I go, that's a great bill. I can't find a single flaw with that bill. Now, the only flaw that I would have is that I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I'm a hardcore libertarian. I'm a basic, for whatever reason, I'm the libertarian that has stepped into the social issues. I guess probably because it's where my education and stuff leans. But when I look at that bill, sure, I want to get rid of public education, right? But setting that aside, given the current landscape that we have, can you name anything in that bill that is problematic, because everything that I see in that bill is a net positive for parents to protect their children in public education from, from political grooming, developmentally inappropriate education, and kind of really bad things that are the kind of the worst excesses of the philosophy that I described. Is there like a thing you can point to that you say, I don't like this because it's pernicious in some way?
Well, we weren't really in support of that bill necessarily, because we know that the bill exactly, the way you're brought up to understand is that you go to school to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. You're not there to learn about social issues, and the bill wasn't, I guess it wasn't saying that the teacher can't have his, if he's gay, can't say that he was with his partner, but the
bill doesn't say that.
Right. So the bill is actually, if you look at it, how it's constructed, it's really more of a piece of anti-trans legislation than it is anything else.
Can you point to anything?
Well, I don't have the bill in front of me, but
all right, that's super fair. That's super fair. I apologize. What the bill does, right? What the bill does specifically is it bans teaching of specific sexual orientations as a lesson plan, gender orientations, etc., for children K through second grade. Right. So if you're a kindergartner, a first grader, or a second grader, you can't have a lesson plan that teaches about transsexuals or like different types of relationships, etc. Then it says, what is developmentally appropriate. Now, what is developmentally appropriate is to be decided by your local school board and a set of lawyers and red tape, etc. I'm sure there will be issues in that. The second thing that it does, so there's three main things that it does. The second thing that it does is it allows parents, if there is a violation, to go to the school board, then to bring in a state level mediator to attempt to resolve the issue or see if there was an issue. And if the mediation fails to come to something, allows the parent to sue on behalf of their children if there was a violation that couldn't be settled by the mediator. And the third thing that it does is it demands that if the school gives any medical care, which is to say you go to a guidance counselor and they socially transition you or something like that, you must inform the parents unless a reasonable person would believe that abuse was occurring or that abuse may occur from this interaction. When I see that just sounds like protecting kids from radical critical gender theorists that want to, like psych standards, that want to educate kindergartners on shit that their brain can't fucking fathom.
Right, and that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not against that at all whatsoever. My concern is when things get twisted a little bit, and things usually do, and people, like I said, our guest who was teaching teachers, they originally scrapped her program, and then they called her back and said, well, you're allowed to come back, but you have to do it this way and this way and this way. I'm like, that's just taking away freedom of speech altogether. I mean, and I don't consider myself an anarchist, but I'm Cuban, and I was born in a communist country, and I left Cuba. And anything that resembles communism or being told what to do, anything that resembles fascism, it's like I will not put up with it.
Well, I would say I am an anarchist. Maybe you don't think I'm a real anarchist because I'm an ANCAP and I believe in capitalism, but I want the total dissolution of the state. I would say that it's not a freedom of speech issue, and it doesn't apply chilling effect doctrine. And the reason I would say that is because you're a teacher, you're a government employee in charge of other people's children. Now, if we were in a Montessori school or a private school that was totally decoupled from state funding, like most private schools, not including school choice places, which you can see why I'm not a big proponent of school choice. If you're in a private school, then I do think it is a freedom of speech issue. If the company wants to teach a policy, informs parents that they're teaching that, and parents want that taught, and for whatever reason, the government comes in and says you're not allowed to say that, that's one thing. But when you're talking about public education, you're talking about tax-paying dollars. You're talking about people that don't have a certain amount of money are essentially forced to go to these schools. I mean, they're not really, they could homeschool, et cetera. But yeah, no, that's not fascism or freedom of speech, because the children become wards of the state, and it's important that the state doesn't do anything towards your children that could potentially upset parents. But of course, then we get the paradox of the state, because it's always going to upset someone.
Right, but you understand like where the concern is that in politics, and we've seen some really weird things, you know, when Trump was in office, and just even with Biden. I mean, I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat, I'm an independent, because frankly, I believe both wings belong to the same bird, and I believe they just pit us against each other. Politics
Agreed.
is dirty. I've never liked it. I've never liked politics. I never will. I think that politicians are very dirty. They use tactics and things to rile up their base, or even rile up people into violence and do all sorts of different things. And you know, that worries me. And when I see the right doing what they're doing right now, they're trying to like demonize transsexuals, it concerns me that it will end up in violence. It will end up in having our rights removed, our ability to have trans care removed, you know, and even like the ability that if there is a child that needs to be socially transitioned and then possibly placed on blockers, which is not ideal because blockers do have side effects. And I mean, we talked as any pharmaceutical, that's like the last resort. Even for adults, transitioning to me is like the last resort.
It's like the ultimate, like at the end of the road, if you have to do that.
Yeah, so, I would say it's unacceptable always to put a child on puberty blockers. Like I'm okay with social transition. I'm okay with like going to a therapist, talk therapy. I'm okay with, you know, makeup and clothing and dressing and changing the name and things like that. The problem I have is that a few things. The first one is what I already mentioned, right? As a libertarian, I believe that children are emergent adults and that a permanent change to the natural body needs to be something that only an adult can do. That I don't think a parent as a guardian can say that they can make permanent changes to the human body that are cosmetic. I would say the same thing about any weirdo rich, you know, Hollywood kid that like gets lip fillers or something like that on their teenager, right? I would say the same thing. You know, I don't think that there's any restitution that needs to be paid for like ear piercings or something, obviously. But yeah, I would say that's number one. But number two, I don't think there's any good data that suggests that this is efficacious to do to minors. I've yet to see a single scientific study that looks at, you know, three populations: a control population, a population of self-identifying trans individuals that goes through gender affirming care, social care without any medical transition, and then one that goes through with medical transition that is long enough to account for the minimum, the average detrans rate for males, which is biological males, which is 7 years. Biological females tends to be 4 years, and account for comorbidities. There's not a single study that does this. And so the science, as far as I can tell, is pseudoscience. And I don't see how you can justify permanent physical, you know, changes to a body under the presumption of science that's not in, and say, well, this is what they, you know, we think they would consent to. I think it's appalling.
Well, among the rare cases of those children that undergone the pubertal suppression and taking those GnRH antagonists, then they basically, people like Nicole Maines, who's now Supergirl on whatever network, I think, or one of the characters.
I'm not aware of this. You're telling me there's an attractive trans girl playing Supergirl right now? Because boys.
She's actually one of the other characters in there, and they do tackle trans issues on the show. But Nicole Maines is one of the very earliest patients of Dr. Spack in Boston Children's. And basically, Nicole and her brother were twins, and Nicole had her puberty suppressed, and she has transitioned and flawlessly entered into, you know, life and acting and doing whatever she wanted to do, living her best life. And she is absolutely grateful for that. Now, that doesn't speak to the Jalissa Vines or Chloe Coles or others that have been out there that transition and then detransition because they did not feel comfortable. And for those people that didn't feel comfortable, we are all for their detransition. I mean, we support detransitioners. You know, we want them to be who they are, you know? I mean, we didn't do this in order to like become some fake person. I mean, we literally, you know, you have other detransitioners giving accounts about how they were tired of playing the game, faking it, and it didn't feel comfortable and it was unnatural. And it's like, I didn't do this for that reason. You didn't do it. I mean,
the other feels uncomfortable and unnatural to me. This is like,
So, but what I'm putting forward though, right, is that we both agree that there is an element of social contagion, that is present. And what I'm saying is, I don't see any science, like what we are seeing is pseudoscientific garbage in support of an ideology that presumes to speak for trans people, and is an onus to be able to do permanent medical things to minors. I can't justify that.
Okay, in all honesty, trans medicine is relatively new, very new. So the studies are undergoing. Look, there is empirical, you know, like Nathan Coles, there's a lot of young who were transitioned very young and now are fully happy, well-developed adults, young adults that are living their best life. They're so grateful. Who was that other one that?
Corey Ray.
Corey Ray. She's like thankful that she didn't have to have the secondary characteristics. It's very detrimental.
Maya Henry.
Yeah, there's a ton of them. For a biologically born male to transition after they've had all the secondary characteristics kick in. The Adam's apple, the deep voice, it's, you know,
larger
the face,
structure,
the larger.
height.
So when they block their puberty, it prevents them from doing that. And so the ones that are living happily lives and blending in beautifully, you don't hear from because they're happy, they're blended in. You know, they're not like the ones that transition and it didn't work out for them because that's not who they were. You know, they was like, it's like, okay, I think this is what I am. They tried it, didn't go right, boom. What I don't like is the blame game, blaming the medical industry. It's like, look, the medical industry has had a lot of blood on their hands, a lot of stuff since the beginning of time. Okay, since they've been part of, you know, trying to fix us making profit. They don't care about you. They care about the profit. So can't hold an industrial complex responsible. It's like, when I did this, am I going to blame somebody for what I did? It's like, I did the research, and back then there wasn't hardly anything. You know, it's like, yeah, this is what I want.
And see, what we're finding is that a lot of times we hear detransitioners say, I had no idea that I couldn't grow my breasts back. I had no idea that my voice was never going to, you know, go back up again. I mean, they come up with these stories that back in 2015, PBS came out with the documentary. It was called Growing Up Trans. Dr. Robert Garofalo over at Lurie Children's in Chicago was sitting with an FTM kid, you know, a future FTM, and was saying, with the parents, now do understand that these treatments are experimental. You are really kind of like guinea pigs, you know, but is it what you want? It's going to cut your ability to have children in the future. Do you want this? And of course they're not at the age to say, oh, I don't want it, you know, but their parents are in the room and they're getting
so this, I do have to push back a little bit here, because this is probably the biggest point of contention between your views and mine is, first and foremost, like there's a couple of things to tackle. The most recent one you brought up is, you know, are the doctors appropriately informing? I'm positive there are plenty of doctors that are, you know, very, very careful about it, doing everything they can to let people know of what is going on in the future. But a child can't consent to the idea of non-motherhood. It's impossible for a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old or even a 17, 18, and I would even argue a 19 and 20-year-old, if you've met some of these girls, right, to really understand what they're giving up when talking about motherhood. But we recognize that like adults can do to their bodies what they want to do with their bodies, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also an element of medical fraud that occurs. I mean, we've also seen other videos where they're training at Philadelphia Children's Hospital, where, you know, they have a child come in that says that they're trans, and, you know, the nursing staff and they train the hospital staff to make sure that they form a coalition along with the child psychologist that tells them that social transition is the only appropriate path. They come together and train them that there's one road and one path, and it's because it's profitable to them. It's profitable to the hospital, and it aligns with the ideology.
Do you believe, I mean, there's so many lies out there. They could make up a little training video and say, look, this is what's being done. You know, it could be a lie. Somebody created an acting gig, you know, or a scenario, and they're showing this as if it's, I mean, Philadelphia Hospital
is aware of it and is not responded in a negative to say that it's not them, which Occam's razor goes to show. Yeah, we know that we did it, because if we say it's not us and you can prove that it's us, you can sue the living shit out of us. So I would say that does exist. Now, is that every children's hospital? Is that every institution? No. But I think there are people out there that are telling people, look, you can either have a dead daughter or a living son. And then there are people that are out there going, look, this is a huge deal. You really need to make sure that, like, you know what you're getting into. My question is kind of back to the original question, because I don't think it was really looked at, is that, yes, there are people who are very happy that they were given, you know, androgen therapy before they had fully gone through puberty and developed secondary sexual characteristics. And their lives are probably better for going through that, right? They're happier in their bodies because they were able to transition in a way that they might not have been able to do as an adult. The problem is there's no science to support the efficacy of this in comparison to different forms of talk therapy over the long run. And comparing it to a group that waits until they're 18. That science isn't available. So how can we justify permanently changing children's bodies that are unable to consent to these things based off of the idea that, well, if we have enough safeguards, it'll be okay? Because some people are going to have their lives ruined by, regardless of how they got captured, regardless of whether or not it was the internet, whether it was their community at school, whatever it is, some people's bodies are going to be changed and their lives are going to be ruined by this as well. And I think that even one is enough to warrant the understanding that this is something we have to wait until people are 18.
Yeah, but then you have the secondary characteristics kick in, and then you have a more.
Oh, sorry, you cut out. Sorry, you cut out for a little bit. You weren't loud enough. I apologize. Could you say that again?
Okay. That there's going to be individuals who be very upset. They couldn't stop the secondary characteristics because they couldn't go on. Couldn't, you know, now they have to deal with shaving their Adam's apple, painful laser and electrolysis.
If you could maybe speak up or get a little closer to the mic, like the Discord sensitivity was a little bit off. It's probably the air conditioning, and I apologize. Yeah, we can hear you. I apologize. Okay. I just want to make sure that your people are able to actually hear your arguments and I'm not just brushing them aside.
Okay. So what do we do with the individuals that are going to, like, regret the fact that they didn't go puberty blockers and now they have to contend with shaving their Adam's apple, lasering or electrolysis, facial hair, prone to male pattern baldness because once, you know, the puberty goes into motion. What do we do with that? You know, I wanted to also bring up, you mentioned at 13, you don't know, right? That you don't know if you're a parent. At 13, I knew enough that I did not want to ever be pregnant. I did not ever want to have any intimacy with a guy because I was scared that I was going to get hurt. And that has followed me throughout my entire life. And I was 13. I knew from that moment on that I didn't want, to be with a man, that I didn't want to have babies. It's like people think that children are not capable, and they don't understand. I mean, our culture babies children, to the point where back in old times, a 13, 14-year-old was working the farm and they had all ability. They were pretty much, once, a young girl went through her menses, she already, was
they
like
had her married off.
And, we like treat kids nowadays and that's why they have no coping mechanism. They can't make decisions. It takes them forever to grow up because parents don't want to let them grow up. They don't give
Helicopter.
Helicopter parents.
So all right. So now we're talking about consent and changing of age of consent, which is always a tricky subject for ANCAPs because for whatever reason, they always accuse us of being against the age of consent. I would say that those times were different and because the culture was different. And what I mean by that is that there was guardianship, that they were not consenting. What occurred if you go back 100 years ago, or you go back 200 years ago, the male father of the home that was usually present, which is not so much true these days, was in charge of the family. There was a dowry. There was a certain acceptance that these people were married off, but they were married off with a father's consent for his children, knowing that this was a good man, that this would be a good marriage. To compare that to the ability to understand as an individual without that guardianship, I think is a false equivalence, because what we're really talking about is a guardian recognizing that those children were being in a good situation and was acting as the consenting adult in the relationship by agreeing. Eloping was rare. Shotgun weddings were a thing, right? And the eloping was something that would give severe shame in society and would deny you your dowry. So I don't think even then they would have considered a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old or even a 15-year-old as a fully consenting adult. What I think they considered them as their children, and in some societies even as their property, that was under the charge of the man of the household, that was a fully grown man that could determine whether or not a partner was actually good for them, right? I don't think that you're not living in a world where a 13-year-old has Tinder and Instagram and is hooking up with random 30-year-old dudes against their father's wishes, right? And so I would lay that same logic to the situation here, which is that maybe there is a situation, right, where the parent is in a position of authority to be able to consent in lieu of the child. The problem is that there is no data. There is nothing to we have a garbage pile of pseudoscience combating against a radical Marxist ideology that is working in tandem with pharmaceutical companies that wants as many people to socially transition and medically transition as possible and sees it as a moral good and gives these people treats that you have schools where they're, not just cracking eggs, but that they're isolating people from parents. And you have an uneducated parental, parents that are assailed by a medical industry that has trainings to have multiple different experts tell them that you've got to transition your child. And so I think in this environment, with this level of pseudoscience, there's just no justification for the current support of minors being able to medically transition just because some people have absolutely benefited from that. It doesn't outweigh harm. There's no amount of harm for something you see what I'm saying? Do you kind of get where I'm going with that?
I do, but I also think that, as much as we want to be a concerned tribe to guide and guard the kids, ultimately it's between the parent, the doctor, and the child. Ultimately. As much as we want to be nosy bodies and stick in and create legislation and have politics kick in and tell people what and can't do, where does it stop? Now it's with transsexuality. Next is with something else. How much do we have politics and the government telling people what they can and cannot do.
I mean, you have.
I agree with that sentiment.
Conservative Party. You have
Okay, go ahead.
the feminists. You have the right-wing conservatives. You have the feminists. You have these people that look at transsexuality with great disdain. Christians, and basically they're looking for any avenue. Just like in 2015 when gay marriage became legal in this country, they got livid about it, and that is when the attack on the T began. It started, after Caitlyn Jenner, the whole trans tipping point with Laverne Cox on the Time magazine, and that just really infuriated people. So they wanted to find a target for them to get their legislation passed. And the things, like Kristi Noem, she passed anti-trans bill about transgender girls not being able to play in sports, but the reality is that there were no transgender girls in the state of South Dakota that were even playing sports,
right.
There was one several years ago, but it was done to just incite the townspeople, to get them upset. So what better is to upset their townspeople over the trans issue, because they don't agree with it fundamentally, moralistically. They don't agree with it, ideologically. They don't agree with it at all. And they can find, like a feminist can find, partnership with a conservative, a leftist lesbian can be friends with a conservative over this issue. But it's a false friendship, because they don't like each other, because they don't like what they stand for, but they'll stand for, the trans thing, because they, feminists hate women, hate men, and, Christians hate the LGBT, so.
Well, but so I would interject a little bit, right? Because if a mother murders her child, right? And she has other children, obviously we care. We don't say, well, that's just between a mother and the child, right? So, I mean, there is an element, right, where we as humans, we recognize human rights, individual liberties, and we recognize that children are deserving of those same human rights and those same individual liberties as anybody else. So I do think that there is a little bit of a disconnect to say oh, well, ultimately this is just between the doctor and the child and the parent, and that you have no say in that, right? Because if the doctor and the parent and the child deserve, say that we should kill this kid, obviously you have a say, right? There's a certain line.
That's where the courts kick in, and that same idea, that same place you're looking at, well, that's why the school stepped in, because parents were being very cruel to their LGBT kids. And so they had to step in and protect the kids from their own parents. So it's one of those crazy things. But, I was looking because I made some notes. There was this Belgium study that is relatively new, and it should be coming out, that, are proven that there is a genetic and hormonal influence that creates that gender dysphoria in the brain. And there's a link between brain development and gender identity. So there are many studies in the works that they're planning to bring out.
Yeah, so preprint studies really, preprint studies that haven't been peer reviewed and that I can't look at the methodology are kind of I'm excited that studies are being done to attempt to understand this, but it's certainly not anything that we can base any claims off of.
Well, the reason that they weren't was back in 1983. Any transgenders were banned in 2015 when that ban was lifted, and so they're complaining. The anti-trans people are complaining and saying, "Where are the studies? Where are the longitudinal studies?"
They weren't allowed to do
They
them.
weren't allowed to do them. They were given a mandate not to do that. So that this has only begun, but we do have the lived life and experience of an older population that has transitioned, and we can look to them.
And
Yeah,
look
well,
at all the
there's several issues, I think, with that, right? Like, first of all, you know, there is something we can glean from an older trans population, without a doubt, right? But the circumstances when you two were transitioning were probably different, even between the two of you, and the circumstances that exist now, right? Which is to say, you know, a circumstance where, you know, gender dysphoria wasn't even taken seriously until, you know, 20 sessions with a psychotherapist and a second opinion and like proof that you had, gender dysphoria that was persistent for years and years, proof that it was that you had tried talk therapy, that you had tried being androgynous, that you had tried being, a stud, if you will, and that none of these things brought you anything, in any sense of relief, and that you're transitioning as an adult where you are a full mind, body conscious, and you have inductive reasoning skills. That's a wildly different world than the one of 40% of children in California schools identifying as part of the LGBT community, whereas every other population throughout human history is somewhere between 1% to 4%. Right? It's a completely different space.
That speaks volume in a lot of different things. Number one, there's something going on for us to understand. We're at this grave amount of individuals that are coming out of the woods, literally. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from the endocrine disrupting chemicals in the environment? Is it coming from the parents? They're not raising their kids the way they should, not giving them an outlet for their emotions, their feelings, how they feel, how they should express themselves. From years and years of being told, little boys are supposed to do this, little girls are supposed to do that. Little girls don't walk that way. All these years of suppression, of just kind of like hiding our feelings and just like not being able to be who we are. It's almost like it's exploding right now. So nature is talking, the universe is talking, something's happening.
Well, what we've heard about just
universe, sorry.
If you give frogs a dose of atrazine.
Yeah.
Okay. Atrazine is
this Alex Jones moment?
No. There's actually research.
There's actually research.
No. That's what Alex Jones was talking about when he's talked about turning the frogs gay. He was talking about atrazine.
Well,
atrazine. Yeah.
Okay, so glyphosate is the number one. Of all the pesticides. Atrazine is the second one. Okay. Atrazine creates PCOS in female frogs. It's like they are actually androgenizing the frog in the sense, like you were talking about Alex Jones saying that feminizing.
Yeah.
Because when atrazine is absorbed into our bodies, male or female, it responds by androgenizing or masculinizing or feminizing a man.
I would say this: there could be. No one wants to do univariate analysis, right? Like we don't want to say it's this one thing or this other thing. That being said, you have a massive swing in 2016, and this massive swing is not a large change in diet. It's not a large change in chemicals in our food supply. It doesn't correlate with a large change in parental decisions in the way that we parent. What is massively different, right, is critical gender theory. Now, obviously, there can be other effects, right? Like there's research in, the effect of waiting longer and longer to have children and neurodivergent behavior. There's research, preliminary research, of course, like we were talking about earlier with other things of birth control, women that tend to be on birth control for very long periods of time and how that can change the development of the child in utero. But the major change is a philosophy that is promulgated intentionally in our education system, especially and in our media and everywhere. That is, what conservatives may fearmonger as the trans agenda or things of that nature. But there's no other way to look at it than to say that there is a concerted effort by Marxists to target children and absolutely want to paint them as eggs and crack them. And you know, how do we fix that without having a right-wing shift? This is my primary concern against the right.
I think we have to set our egos aside, because I think there's a lot of ego, a lot of temper, ideology.
Oh, I'm sorry. You cut up. There's a lot of egos.
There's a lot of egos and a lot of tempers being flared via the ideology. I think that people need to learn how to come to the table with an open heart, converse with truth, not with some agenda, and try to do what's best for everyone involved. We can't just say, well, we're going to just eliminate everything and not allow, trans medicine at all. And so we've got to, look at the bigger picture and understand where it's all coming from, do more research. I believe that we need to go back to the model when I transitioned. I had a whole year of therapy. I had to live as a man before I transitioned. And that was the thing that made you like socially transition in your day-to-day life to make sure that, hey, is this what you want? Can you handle this? And I think, and I know the trans community is not going to like that, but, I don't believe that every Tom, Dick, and Harry that says one day they wake up and they think, oh, I'm a girl now, I'm a boy. That shouldn't be. There's got to be more to it than that. And I believe there's need to be a lot more screening, a lot better ways of finding out, without a shadow of a doubt, do you have gender dysphoria?
If a child has shown persistent and insistent since they were very, very
a toddler,
young, right? Since they were a toddler, like you were talking earlier, then that's a whole different child than the one that just says, oh, gee, after school, I decided to be trans at 12, and mom, by the way, call me by these pronouns, and my friend is also transitioning. That's a different situation entirely. I do not think that these gates should be down for allowing the mass crazy, what Sig Gallagher is doing over there in Florida, transitioning people without nipples and stuff and doing chest surgeries for genderqueer people, and all of that is just, it's off the charts, because we know she wants to have the big boat and beautiful penthouse condo up in Miami, but the fact is that they're hurting these kids, because these kids, they're not the persistent, consistent, and insistent. They're not the ones that from a young age identified, and their mother, fathers, that their child has a difference to them. It's not like all of a sudden, overnight.
I don't know. This is something I have to think about in terms of a specific case. If we have a lot of objective data where the most rational choice appears to be medical transition. We don't live in that environment right now. And so I can confidently say that is not something I should say would be legal for anyone. But, I don't know. It is something I think about is, if there was an objective data and science and everything that showed, for a subset of a very small subset, that this was the best option. Even then, I would probably still say no. I don't know. It's something I have to contend with myself, because I don't see the justification for permanent change to a body. I would need an overwhelming amount of evidence, right, that shows that for this group of people that we can identify accurately, this is very clearly what their will be as an adult. We don't live in that world right now. But if we could, maybe.
You're talking about not making something legal, like when a minor wants to go get a piercing or a tattoo, or a young girl wants to get breast implant.
I'm against all of that. I'm against all of that.
Yeah, but they do it. No one's not making it not legal. No one's like walking around saying, we must stop this. Yeah, it's being done daily.
Taking their daughters to get Botox and lip fillers and things at 15. And nobody's making a big deal about it.
Well, nobody's making a
Rather
big deal
than
about it because there
get
isn't
rhinoplasty as well.
there isn't a
and
political ideological push. There's a question that keeps popping up in my chat, and the question is, do the guests recognize that they're rather uniquely nice people in contrast to the majority of contemporary TRA movement that is militant and predatory? TRA is the contemporary Spanish Inquisition. How do you react to that?
We're not TRAs. I mean,
at all.
like I said, I transitioned back in 2003. I've been on the Maury Povich show. I did the Spanish circuit. I've had many documentaries trying to educate people because I think education is important. Communication is important. Twitter, I can't stand because I get easily tempered when somebody does something to my wife or says something, and I will, I'm like a raging bull on Twitter because I don't stand for disrespect. But I have a heart for detransitioners. I detransitioned 6 times. I know what it is to like face with like, oh my goodness, what have I done? It's because at the moment you're like, okay, how do I undo this? Well, you can't. So I understand the fear of parents and the fear of society, what they're going to do to these kids. But we have to look at both sides. Not all stories end up in tragedy. A lot of stories end up with happy endings. And that's what we need to learn, how to walk this person-to-person basis. We need to learn how to communicate. We need to stop fighting with each other.
The problem
at the end, let me finish.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
At the end of the day, while we fight, the elites are laughing all the way to the bank. The corporations are making money out of our suffering. So we need to start uniting as a species a little bit more and stop fighting one another, because that's exactly, I've never seen in my entire time that I've been part of the LGBT community, I've never seen gays, lesbian, trans people fight the way that we're fighting now. And that breaks my heart, because we've all been through so much. From the moment we were little, we've been shamed, ridiculed, hurt, violated. And right now, all I see is a community that's just tearing each other apart. And that doesn't solve a single thing.
So the issue that I see about this is, I think we're coming from it from very different philosophical backgrounds of what is right and what is wrong. It seems that what you guys are doing is kind of like a consequentialist analysis, right? You're saying there are people that are happy, there are people that are sad, and if the overall harm is better to go this way, then that is the way that we should kind of like move forward. The problem that I see with
necessarily think that.
Okay,
honestly,
go ahead.
I think what we're trying to say and express, and I hope that we can express it in a way that's understood, is that for those very few who do need these types of treatment, that they should be available to them. But on a mass scale, absolutely not. They should never. A child identifying at the age of 12 and then wanting to get their breast removed at 15, no, just no. That's not something that people should be doing, because this is something that, a parent of an insistent, consistent, persistent child, the rare ones that there are out there that do undergo puberty blocking and stuff like that, and then they basically just melt into society and nobody would have the slightest understanding. They know, their parents know, the children know. It's something that has been therapied and thought out. This rushing plan, like so many of these now detransitioners. I mean, you've got Kat Cattinson, who did a transition back in 2020. Fox interviews her and says that she's been a trans man since the age of 15 or 12 or something, and she had only tried testosterone for like 4 or 5 months during 2020, and then she didn't like it, and now she's like talking about the danger of testosterone. Mark's been on T since 2003. His world has not come apart.
I'm 58 years old.
He's healthy.
Yeah.
There are things that, people are just blowing out of proportion.
Yeah, that's where we have a concern, because it's like there's a lot of lies being spread, a lot of being spread, and no one's really communicating,
But see, the issue I have is when we look at the science, right? What we're talking about is you have a condition, gender dysphoria. We'll take a classic example, right? Which is persistent, consistent, etc. Now, what you have to do in order to actually understand is like, we can't go, well, I'm happier because of this, right? That's great. You're happy. But the problem is that a lot of things have changed in your life. That's not science, right? Like what that is saying, I did this thing and now I'm happy. The problem is that you can't compare it to an alternate timeline where you didn't do this thing and you lived your life and you had traditional talk therapy and you didn't transition in that way, right? And so what we attempt to discover the truth by doing not just longitudinal studies, but studies where we compare, intervention and where one intervention is done in another intervention. This is the thing, is that like if someone says, oh, well, see, I went through this process and my general satisfaction with life survey is better than it was previous to this. It's like, okay, well, that shows that you're happier now in this moment of time than you were in that moment of time. That doesn't tell us anything about transition. It doesn't tell us anything about hormones. What it tells us is that it potentially tells us that this was an intervention that gave you some happiness. That's all it tells us. It doesn't tell us that whether or not you would have been happier with or without it. And it doesn't tell us whether or not that is something that is generally efficacious or that it's the best treatment. You kind of see where I'm going with this. And so like when we use that, even then, when we use that as a means of trying to justify certain medical things that permanently change the body of a child that's unable to consent, you're seeding into dangerous territory as far as I'm concerned. I'm very hard line on this. I know, I'm sorry, but it's a hard line in the sand for me.
Yeah, you're entitled to that. But the thing is that there are different views, there are different opinions, there are different ways of looking at this. What I find it really hard is like for any politician to make laws to prohibit anything. Because if that were the case, then we should stop using automobiles, because some people get behind the wheel, they fall asleep and they kill somebody with that automobile. They're not responsible. There's so many things that we would outlaw because it hurts children, it hurts people. Foods in our cupboard are number one thing. Sugar should be banned, in my opinion. It's the worst, most evil substance that has been created on Earth. People are getting cancer, metabolic syndrome, you name it. But no one's out there trying to outlaw sugar. It's buyer beware. If you're responsible to not to put that in your mouth, then it's all good. So my problem is we can't make laws to outlaw anything. We should be able to make our own decisions. And if we have children, the parents should be the ones making that decision for the children. They know their child best, or they should. That's my other thing. I don't think parents are really communicating well with their children. They're not raising their children right. Girls are resenting their mothers. And that's why a lot of these RJDs, they don't like how their mother treat them. They want them to be a certain way and they're rebelling. So there's a lot of issues involved here. But no one should tell anyone how to live their life. What to do, how to dress. And we've had this throughout history, boys being told, no, don't do this, girls being told, don't do that. This is why we are where we are. One of the main reasons.
The state of Florida has now made it illegal for people on Medicaid who are transgender to be able to get, and that's like,
I'm sorry, to be able to get what?
If Mark and I were on Medicaid in the state of Florida, they would not allow us to get our medicine anymore. And that is affecting a group of people in a way that's discriminating of their ability and their need for such treatments, because they have transitioned. Gender dysphoria is recognized as such in the DSM-5, and basically they are being told that they can't get their treatment. So I think there's a commonality, at least from a libertarian perspective. I think maybe that's the issue. And because I said you guys were talking about consequences, and
I do think you're doing a consequential analysis. Well, I won't say I do think, I know you are, because that's the argument you're presenting. So what I would say in terms of the automobile and things like that, what libertarians are concerned about is what is morally justified, right? And what is morally justified is anything, as far as we don't look at what is morally justified so much as we look at what is not justified, right? By negation. An act of aggression against another person is not a justifiable thing, at least according to our ideology. And I would say is objectively true. But so when you talk about an automobile, it's not an act, getting into a car. It's not an act of aggression to get into a car, right? It's an everyday occurrence to transport things, right? There's an assumption of an inherent risk. Sure. Everything comes with an inherent risk, but it's not an intentional act that, disrespects the rights to one's consent to their own body. I would say that.
Have you been on the road lately? There's a lot of really rageful people on the road. I mean,
for sure. Oh, there's some acts of aggression. There's some road rage
we're on
for
the
sure.
road every day. I'm on the road.
For
we're on
sure.
the road every day.
But
it's like you're taking your life in your own hands, literally.
I would say that, right? So when we look at the Medicaid example, I would say that Medicaid in general is an act of aggression. The existence of taxation that takes money from people, right, and then steals that money from them, and then redistributes it towards other people is an act of aggression, because there's theft there by taking money, and because some people don't want their money spent on certain things, some people do. And we do this weird thing where we're like, the majority wins a vote for a politician, and then they decide for us. That being said, I do understand that while these socialistic systems, such as, redistribution of wealth and Medicare, Medicaid are being done, there is something kind of troubling about specifically targeting a specific community for not giving them access that you then give to other people. Like, I would say that is kind of wrong, but the Medicaid or the Medicare is the inherent wrong thing first, is that you stole money from people and then you gave it to other people. And now you get to decide how you want to use that money. You know what I mean? Like, how you use that money isn't really the initial act of the problem to begin with. But I do agree that it is worrying to see politicians use these programs to target specific communities. But I would say over and over again that,
real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
The government does that, takes our money. I mean, we're taxed all the time about everything, from the gas to if you smoke, the cigarettes, if you drink the alcohol, you go out and buy a shirt, you get taxed. I mean, we are getting ripped off day in and day out, and we have no way of complaining, no way of like, hey, this is wrong. We're being taxed on our hard-earned sweat daily. It's like the government takes a chunk, and it's like we don't get to decide where our money goes.
Agreed. Taxation is theft. Welcome to being a libertarian.
Yeah, well, I have an album called Enslave, and one of the songs that I wrote, Enslave, and you call this freedom, free to pay your taxes and told what to do. It's like,
Given a number.
Yeah, you're given a number of your Social Security, and then you end up in a nursing work all your life is gone, that kind of thing. So nothing is fair on this planet except for the elite that run the show, literally. So it's like, it depends on what you're looking at and what frame of reference and what, there's nothing.
I'm gonna need you to send me that song. I'm gonna need you to send me that song. I'm just letting you know.
I
need you
got
to.
a whole album for that he did.
Yeah, if you go on, like, I have a playlist because I've been writing since I was 10 years old, and I'm really like, I say things as they are, and anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to mention that these kids who are, they're now older, 24, and they're like, I wasn't at the age of consent, and now I can't nurse a baby. Now I mean, and it's tragic, it pulls at the heartstrings, it's very sad what took place. One of them had a phalloplasty surgical procedure done where they put in an artificial penis onto a female. And that is a very invasive procedure. And that
It's the
is
worst
something
of all of them.
just-
It's even
yeah.
more
just-
dangerous than the vaginoplasties.
Yeah.
It's these surgeries.
I didn't do it. I didn't do it because all the research. I'm no way. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that to myself. I had enough sense.
No, the science just isn't there yet. Yeah,
it's
it
not.
But
isn't.
see, what happens is that they're told, like in the case of one of these detransitioners, they literally were told, no, you cannot get puberty blockers. No, you can get hormones. We will not do it. And they literally went for a second opinion, found somebody who would do it. Instead of like, the parents, they understand that that child has been told no. They're sitting in the appointment with that child. Some of these children go around their parents' back, and in college, after they graduate high school, they like go get an appointment at a clinic somewhere, like a Planned Parenthood or something, and they do it behind their back. And then they're saying, but I wasn't at the age of consent. And it's like, your parents were there. You were told no. The professional said, you're not a good candidate, or we see other comorbid issues that are going on here that we need to resolve. We need to ask more questions. And they're like, no, they're on Twitter, they're on Tumblr, they're on Instagram, and they're like, I think I look managed. Do you think I look this? What's the right amount of testosterone? I mean, one of these transitioners said, I went to an endocrinologist. They told me I could get 20 grams of testosterone. I said, that's not enough. I need more. What are you going to give me? Can you give me more than that? They walk out with 100 milligrams, and it's like they want this so bad. It's like they force it to happen. And then when it happens and they don't like it, then they blame the medical industry for doing it when they're the ones that kicked the door down, And that's not the case in every single one. But that's the case in some.
An overwhelming majority of individuals that are engaged under the age of 13 in sexual relationships with adults have a personality disorder. Why? Because these people, more often than not, actively seek out to be abused by older individuals. That's a sobering thing. That's a crazy and insane thing to know, but that's what the science shows us, is that child molesters will try and find people, and more often than not, the child molesters are finding people with a personality disorder that actively seeked out to be molested. That doesn't make that person not a child molester, right? If a girl goes to a bar late at night and goes home with some guy and then she's violently raped in a house, that doesn't mean it's her fault, right? I think maybe we're getting into dangerous territory, right? Where we have to tread very carefully in the way that we frame these conversations. If we're saying that children are actively seeking out, their transition, and then saying, well, how could they blame the medical community? Well, the medical community, I mean, you're a child, right? Like we wouldn't blame a child that actively seeks out to be molested and say, oh, well, the child molester has nothing wrong, right? I would say that while I agree that there are people that have been swept up into an ideology and are actively seeking these treatments, and they're going to find them no matter kind of no matter what. Even if a doctor won't do it, they'll go to fucking Keffel's Discord and find a way to get fucking hormones from somebody from a private DM. Let's be fucking honest. That being said, it's not their fault. They're a child. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, they actively made those decisions, but they made those decisions in an environment that has bred them into an ideology that there's something that they're not. And it is the responsibility of parents and the medical community and things to step in and talk fucking sense and monitor their children's fucking internet behavior. And like, there's two fucking apps that you can get right now if you're a parent, right? One of them I think is called like Blue Dog or something like that, or Blue Paw or something. It's like $13 a month. Okay, for the price of a fucking Netflix subscription, you can have monitors. You can have like literally every known app can be monitored with keyword alerts to your fucking phone. And if you have a 14, 13-year-old child and you don't know what's on their Snapchat and you don't know what's being said in the Discord server and you don't know what's on their Facebook, their real Facebook, not the one you think they have, but their second account. You don't know what's going on these, you're a shit fucking parent. And I'm sorry.
But the honest truth is that kids are 5 steps ahead of parents. They've got ways to go around those things. They have other means of being able to get the information that they want. They have these like invisible servers, or like they could go into all kinds of different things that adults don't even know about. Kids are like, they're just 5 steps ahead of the parents. So yeah, parents can do whatever they want to try to do that, and that is important for them to do. But we can't just say, well, I'm doing everything I can, and think that there's like they're like bulletproof from being able to be having their kid influence.
I think communication is the key, and I think parents have forgotten or don't know how to communicate properly with their children. It's like somehow maybe a generational thing. Parents are too busy. They don't really have enough time to sit there and from the moment they're little have that, that talk where the kids will come to you and tell you what they need, what they're feeling, how their emotions are. Most parents don't even teach their kids how to express emotions. Kids don't even know how to express. No one's taught them. We have to teach this to our young. That's very important. So I think there's something going on between all this modern technology, our phones, that's frying the nervous system somehow, some way. People are just not talking. They're just not listening to one another. They're not paying attention. They're not raising these kids right. And kids are kind of raising themselves, and they're like communicating with one another. And they become their own parent, and they decide to do their own thing.
Somehow,
I'm a millennial. I'm a millennial, and I used to have this. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, somehow the concept of like isolation and punishment has been expressed. Like Jordan Peterson has something in his book, 12 Rules, about how you should isolate a child and, have them go into a timeout, and that's a good thing. But
because they can't express anger, so when they express anger,
they're frustrated. And they can't. That shows them that their parents mean business or something. But what's happening is that child is feeling unloved, unaccepted, unwanted. I mean, not heard. Yeah. And you keep doing that type of parenting, and that parenting is going to create these kids who are then going to isolate themselves and go on Tumblr, find community, look for a tribe. We interviewed a detransitioner, and she talked about how she was looking for her tribe. Yeah. She didn't feel like she was ever being heard by her family, and she was looking for a place to belong. Yeah. And this gave her a sense of belonging, And I think one of the things is that we need to realize that nurturing children is something that is so organic and is so like vital. You have to like be like, it's okay. You can express. You're mad, right? You're upset. I see that. I know that you're upset. But the reason we can't do this is this, and it's not just because I said so. It's like have to be a child and express. And
you're breaking up again.
Oh, it's the air conditioning whenever.
Yeah, when that AC cuts on. But I mean, talking about solutions, getting away from our obvious kind of disagreements on the rights of certain children and the science and things of that nature. I don't know that any univariate analysis really can like talk about the breakdown that we're having. There's a lot of problems here, and I don't think you and I are going to be able to hash out all of the issues that are leading to this thing. It's, I think it's obviously incredibly, it's an incredibly complicated thing. Man, it's the way that I view it is, like I said, when I was a millennial, when I was a kid, I used to have this phrase that I would tell people that, I felt like we were a generation raised on HBO. It's kind of what I used to tell people and it's these kids, the Gen Z kids, are a generation of children raised on the internet. And it is terrifying because the thing about the internet, the way that I see it, getting away from the Jordan Peterson stuff. And I don't want to argue about Jordan Peterson. I don't really think that was his point. But the thing about the internet is that we used to live in a society that was, from a Durkheimian perspective, right? We used to live in like little villages of 200 people. And then we had the Industrial Revolution and we lived in cities and, and those ideas expanded. But with the internet, what you have is whatever it is that you want to find, you're going to find a community of those people. And I think that is probably one of the greatest threats to parenting, effective parenting, that people are not realizing, is that if your kid is feeling, for example, like some ideas of white supremacy, and I don't mean like the way the media calls it, I mean like, really believes it. There's tons of places for them to find that, right? And find people that agree with them on that. And it's the same thing with, concepts of gender dysphoria, and in some ways that's cool, right? Like in some ways, in very limited ways, I would say, especially when dealing with children. It's awesome that a child that grows up in an evangelical Christian home that is in the deep South can go to, itgetsbetter.com and can find a Discord server of people that accept them in a way that maybe their household or their small town doesn't. But it is also that very thing that has opened up the floodgates for predators, both from a political perspective, especially on the left. I don't think the right is really necessarily targeting trans kids, individually so much as maybe some of their politics do. But also just sexual predators and all of these things. And so, I don't know that we're going to agree on a whole lot. I think there's still a lot of disagreement between the two of us, but I do appreciate that you guys came to tell your story and your opinions and recognize that even if I don't agree with your middle path, that not everybody is a trans rights activist that stands in front of a corporate building pouring a bottle of piss on themselves and saying that, like, TERFs are monsters and we're going to kill them all, and that TERF should suck my tranny cock, right? Like that's not every trans person that's trying to communicate a better path forward. Again, I still disagree with those things, but if there's anything I think we can hopefully deeply agree on, is that this is a complicated issue, and parents, for the love of God, pay attention to what the fuck your children are doing on the internet.
Exactly. That's when they don't, and when they're not looking, that's when it's gonna happen. So I think the internet, and I've mentioned this before, the internet and poor parent has helped fuel this fire.
Yeah. And maybe you don't agree as strongly as I do, but this fucking critical theory in schools, this isolating and targeting of children to intentionally bring forward ideals that support critical gender theory, I think is something that if you can, get your kids out of public schools.
To me, any type of indoctrination, whether it's religious indoctrination, anything that is putting things inside a human being's mind, especially a young human being, is wrong, because you equip children with tools to learn, to grow, to make proper decisions, but you don't tell them how to think, and you don't think for them. Because so then you've got an adult that has no.
Will you do me one solid? As much as you hate DeSantis's rhetoric, and I understand that, will you look again on your own? You don't got to tell me. You don't got to put it on Twitter. You don't got to do nothing. Will you promise to look at the bill again and look at it and think, maybe there's something here where parents should be concerned and they're trying to do something, and at the same time we can go against the rhetoric.
I agree. I mean, it's like parents should always be told, unless the parent's an abuser.
Yes.
That's the only, but parents are the parent. they're responsible for their children, and that's my point. Parents are responsible.
I mean, no parent should be kept in the dark about their child
Yes.
being called some other gender or a name at a school while, you know, they're not aware of it. Can't do that, you know.
Well,
And also-
apart from the assumed abuse, which is already like against innocent until proven guilty, right? The assumption that parents can't come along and support their child. I don't have any data to support this conclusion, right? Because like many of these things, but I cannot imagine it's in any way, shape, or form healthy for a child to be socially transitioned in school and not at home. That is,
Exactly.
with the parents not even knowing. Like the idea that you can split their social transition seems like you're trying to embed fucking schizophrenia in a kid.
Exactly. Or bipolar disorder or some sort.
Or something. Like there's no way that that's not damaging. Like either the parents are on board or they aren't, but a parent that's in the dark, that doesn't even know, that's calling, you know, their kid, like they have different names and different genders and secret, you know, this idea that some classrooms have gender closets, like, you know, those, you guys seem to really know a lot. So you know what I'm talking about? Gender closets where kids go and then the teachers actively allow them to change clothes so that they can present as a different gender without their parents knowing. That is insane to me. That is psychologically damaging and like it can't be healthy.
Yeah, that's very damaging. That's why everybody's got to communicate. You know, that's very important. Everyone has to be on the team and communicate, whether they agree to disagree, whatever, but they need to communicate.
But I also think, you know, with regards to these efforts and strategies that a lot of right-wing conservatives and political activists use, is that they create all these narratives. Like we found out about that person that had extremely huge breasts in Canada running around at a school. Rebel News grabbed, you know, video of it. It was actually a disgruntled teacher, a shop teacher, who was like going over the top and expressing their dissatisfaction.
I've heard that.
With
I haven't seen any proof. Have you seen any proof of that? Have you seen any? Because I've only heard rumors of that. And I don't know if that's like a 4chan rumor or something. I've looked into it. I can't find it.
The litter box thing has been disproven, but then that was shoved out there into mainstream as if that was happening, where in the school in Minnesota that there's an actual kitty litter box for kids who want to identify as a cat. I mean, that wasn't true at all.
There's a lot of rumors and a lot of damage that politics puts out there to stir people up, and I think that doesn't solve anything. It only gets people upset and fighting one another. But what's that old saying? Divide and conquer. That's what they're trying to do. Divide us.
And then we have the whole drag queen story hour, which is something that I don't agree with at all. We don't agree with it. But we need to also educate people who don't know about trans community, don't know about gay community, that drag queens are males that dress up as women and they do it as entertainment. And then like RuPaul, they go home and then they live as men.
They're not transsexuals.
They're not transsexuals. There's not, you know, I mean, the predatory transsexual person, that's a predatory person who is actually like still running on a high degree of testosterone, because when we suppress our testosterone, we get estrogen, and that kills the sex drive completely. So there is not like, you know, this predatory, you know, trans woman out there that's looking to invade the bathroom. There is a predator out there, occasionally, a man who would like to do that regardless if they wear a dress or not, and do whatever they want to do to inflict violence on women. But, you know,
I know I'm memeing a little. I know I'm memeing here a little bit, but like conservatives, can we all just come together and endorse single bathroom stalls and let this fucking bathroom issue be done with? Like, can we all just from here on out, can we just build single bathroom stalls? People like their fucking privacy in the bathroom anyway. Like it's such a, like it is, there are places where there are people that take advantage. You know, like that probably AGP person, let's be honest, that was was exposing herself to like a young girl in a Korean, bathhouse and things like that. Like, we know that this occurs, but I think it's important to recognize that there is an ideology that is pernicious and that is attacking our society. That's one thing. We can separate that from the trans community, and we can separate that from another issue, which is that anytime there is a space that predators can invade, they will. That is what predators do. That doesn't make the space or the community predatory. That doesn't mean that every Catholic priest is going to molest your child, but that does mean that there's a space, and that the Catholic Church was very good at protecting those people. So of course they did that. It's the same thing with public education, believe it or not. It's some places have higher rates of sexual predation in schools, in public schools, than there. And it's going to be the same thing with bathrooms. When you have a society that demands that all genders are able to go into a bathroom, you're going to have people that wear a wig and are like, I'm alone. That doesn't make this community dangerous. And I do worry about some of that pushback. But at the same time,
get called predators. I mean, we've been called predators on Twitter. I'm just like, predator.
I mean, they're literally feminists that you've been having conversations with on Twitter or Facebook. They're like, you literally should just go into a women's restroom.
I'm like, if I would go to a woman's restroom, I'd be freaking arrested, you know?
I mean, that makes
like, there are people who it's like, dog, like that doesn't work. Like, you're going to have like fucking, are you going to like pee test people as they, like, before they go to the restroom to see if they have, to see if they have progesterone or not in their urine? Like, what the fuck? How the fuck are you going to determine this? Right? There are some people that pass so effectively well that it's an insane thing. The problem that I see too is something very similar with abortion, right? And I think there are a lot of parallels between abortion and libertarians and the left and the right. And I'll explain. There was a compromise that I disagree with, right? I'm not pro-life. I'm an evictionist. It's different. It's weird. I'm not going to get into it. But there was a compromise between the right and the left, and that was safe, legal, and rare. And when abortions were safe, legal, and rare, you had a subset of the right that was pro-life, that thought you were murdering children, and I totally understand and in many ways agree, but not to the extent, again, it's weird, but I understand that. Why did abortion blow up? Well, abortion blew up as an issue because it stopped being safe, legal, and rare. There was an ideology that pushed abortion as something to shout, as something to celebrate. There was women bragging about it. Right? Like, once it stopped being safe, legal, and rare, it woke up the sleeping giant of conservatism that has a knee-jerk reaction based off of their values to go, you want to fuck around, you're going to find out, and we're going to stop all this shit. And I think you're seeing a similar pathway with the conservatives' reaction to the transgender community, which was, it was safe, legal, and rare. There was a very small group of people that maybe they didn't agree with because of religious views or whatever. But for the most part, if they went downtown and they saw somebody, they might make fun of you. They might deride you, but for the most part, they weren't actively involved in legislating anything. And then it stopped being safe, legal, and rare. It started being rapid onset gender dysphoria. It started being, the schools are going to teach your fucking children in kindergarten gender ideology. And all of a sudden it was like, you want to fuck around, you're going to fucking find out. And, I hope that there is, I obviously promulgate libertarianism and freedom, and we have some disagreements on what that means and how those objective ethics work. But I hope that we're kind of in a similar path, a similar vein. Yeah. Lynna, you got to stop fucking with D-trans people, telling them that they wanted shit, but other than that, like, you seem like really fucking cool, nice people. And I agree with a lot of those things. And to borrow a conservative phrase that's often racist as fuck, you're one of the good ones. but yeah, I think it's a similar thing.
I want to add real quick. It's not that we're like telling the transitioner to take responsibility. In a way, it's for them to heal. I know that when I finally realized transition, that I had to accept myself the way that I am right now and be happy with that and stop blaming. I was blaming my mother. I was blaming everybody on the planet for what I did to myself. And I felt sorry for myself. And, I was just like depressed. And until I healed and I took responsibility and I said, this is what I wanted. This is what I chose. I can't blame anybody. It happened because it had to happen, and it wouldn't have happened any other way because it did. And that heals you. That heals you.
Mm-hmm.
So reverse obsession is taking place with a lot of detransitioners. I know, because I felt that reversed. It was like, okay, how do I get this hair off my head? My face? How do I get hair on my head? And it was just like this obsession. It was a worse obsession, detransitioning, than when I transitioned. When I transitioned, it was flawless. So it's healing. To take responsibility, stop being a victim. That's very healing.
And we've interviewed detransitioners for such a long time. I mean, we interviewed Shapeshifter and Tulip Richie.
Yeah.
And we were very respectful. I mean, Shapeshifter was really grateful. She felt like it was like therapy, from an older couple to talk about these things and how the surgery went wrong. And, we have compassion, and our hearts are, definitely broken for them, and also for those teenage transitioners. But what got me going was the fact that I was personally attacked. I mean, my family was involved. My mention of my children and being called an abandoner of kids when they don't even know the story.
And basically, we only went in there to say, they're riling up people because we know there's a political agenda. It's a political organization backing them up. And they're riling up the people. And they know exactly what they're doing. And that's all we went in there to say. And from saying that, it became personal.
I just said, basically, so you're putting off this like really childish, vulnerable vibe to get the people to respond and to draw attention to what you're saying. But you're like doing it in a way that's like painting yourself as if you didn't tell the doctor, no. What do you mean no? I'm going to go somewhere else to get help. It's like you want to do other things and then you do them. And regardless if the medical community is actually doing operations, young millennial men that are corporate driven, that want to feel taller, so they're actually giving them height by adding something, extension to their legs and stuff. They'll do whatever you want them to do.
They'll put a horn on your head if you want to be called a unicorn. I mean, that's what they do.
We know that the medical industry is not ethical. The things that they are doing is not ethical. And trans medicine is just another notch on their belt where they can see a revenue stream. If you can make, oodles of money on a phalloplasty clinic, they're going to want to do that.
Yeah, they're in the business to make money.
They don't have ethics, So basically we were like, okay, so where do we get to the place of personal responsibility? Because in the case of Shapeshifter, who transitioned and their surgery went wrong and they are disgruntled and upset about it, in that case, now they're upset and they're frustrated. But if it had gone well, like for other transitioning women out there that are living their life, then Shapeshifter wouldn't even be here. She wouldn't even be speaking.
Scott Nugent is another one. His surgery went horribly wrong, so he's bitter, angry, and should be. I mean, I'd be too if I'm all messed up like that. But, it's like we can't blame the medical community because they're only doing what we're asking them to do. I asked to have these removed. I asked to get a hysterectomy. I asked for hormones. I can't turn around and I wanted to blame everybody when I detransitioned, but I realized I can't be blaming anyone but myself. And that's when I found peace.
I agree to a certain extent. It might not be the best tactic, but I understand where you're coming from. And I think that's a fair assessment to a certain degree. I do think, however, there is without a doubt an element of medical fraud that is occurring due to ideology that is present, especially recently, and especially towards children. There are parents that have no idea what the fuck is going on. And we've admitted multiple times that this is a really complicated issue. And I appreciate you guys coming on to talk about it from a different perspective. But I think, when there is an element of personal responsibility, sure. But when you're a kid, when your parents don't know what the fuck is going on, when these people are pushing things on you with pseudoscience, not telling you the full dangers, and when social media considers sharing those things, transphobia and hate speech, and you're not allowed to get those things out, and that information is harder to come by and harder to notice and less prevalent. And if I Google search, things, I'm far more likely to find, a lot of pro trans Reddit or something like that than like the D-trans thing. I think that we do have to recognize that, sure, the medical community is giving us what we want. But the medical community is also playing fiddle to an ideology that is very political in nature and is targeting with fraud in a way that allows them to make more money without being honest with people. And so I think there are a lot of people that are swept up in that. And it's like, how do it's like an abuse victim, right? It's like abuse victims do crazy things. And it's like, how much of that is their responsibility and how much of that is the responsibility of the abuser that drove them to that?
Well, I'm going to give our channel a shameless plug. If people are looking
100%.
to find out information, we have, in our channel, is like an Uncle Tom channel. We have, when I was in my religiosity phase, the Christian lady.
Holy shit. Oh God, please don't say that.
Our channel has everything from warning people to talking about AGP. Our channel is filled, it's like an equal opportunity channel. It shows the whole story. It shows the whole story, from talking about AGPs, talking about trans, non-trans, dangers of blockers, you name it. Because we figured it's like, hey, I've been all over the place with this. From being a Christian to now being agnostic or Gnostic, or it's like, you name it. It's all in that channel. If people want to like really find out information and interviews from people from all over the world. Transition radio show.
Are you in the Twitch chat?
We haven't been.
I haven't been. I used to when I was in my religiosity.
Twitch.
No. I meant in the stream. I'll find it.
No,
it's fine. It's fine. I just wanted to link your channel in the chat. It's fine. It's not a big deal. I'll do it now. Anyways, I got it.
Discord world.
Yeah, we don't use this. I used to at one point. Is it here?
We get it. You're a boomer. I've already got it settled. All right.
Yeah,
I've got it settled. So there's their channel. There's their channel, boys.
Hold on. Let's see here.
It's already done. I've already got it taken care of.
It's done.
Okay.
Yeah. There's their channel. I just wanted to make sure you guys were youtube.com /trans man on a mission.
Yeah. That's when I've had a channel since 2006. So.
It's okay.
Oh, that's a long time. Jeez.
Yeah. Since it first
I think this is a good time for us to kind of like wrap up. Is there anything, any one thing that you wanted to say or like put out there? You already kind of, like any final thought?
Well, just that people need to learn to listen to one another. You can't just point fingers and call every transsexual a predator, and try to pick a fight. I mean, it's just, let's learn to listen and communicate with one another. We're human beings. We all bleed the same. We put one pant leg at a time, and when we die, we're either going to be cremated or stuck in a coffin somewhere. So let's enjoy the time we have here on Earth, and life is getting pretty hard for everyone. And let's stop battling one another, because as we battle, divide and they shall conquer. And that's exactly what,
Do you have a minute if anybody wants to ask a question or anything? Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead. Sure.
All right. So just like put it in chat, boys. We'll see if there's anything, like some deep question. If it's a silly, stupid question, I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to pass over it. But if there is anything, Casimir asks, what's your favorite part of this interview and or discussion? That's an interesting question.
Favorite part?
Yeah, sure.
I love being able to like find common ground, being able, find where we can connect and be able to communicate in a way that helps both of us. And I think even in the controversy, even in the discord that we have with each other, I think that it's still a very valuable tool for us, because now we can reflect on things, we can look at things in a different perspective, coming from a different viewpoint and a different lens, and appreciate the differences that we have.
All right, well, chat seems to be fairly quiet. The only question I got was a meme question. Oh, here we go. Are you happy now you transitioned? Satellite of Love.
Yes.
We've been married for like almost 8 years now. And yeah, we're very happy.
Yeah. Extremely happy.
Hell yeah.
I don't recommend.
I love that.
I wouldn't recommend detransitioning to anyone. I mean, I tried it 6 times and it was all for the wrong reasons. It was not for me. It was like to please my mother, to please supposedly God, because I kept getting, told that I was going to go to hell and all this craziness. Look, God loves you. Those that believe in God, no matter what. I call it the universe because I don't even like the word God. I mean, I'm so turned off by religion that, it's source, the universe.
Yeah, you mentioned the universe a couple times. Yeah. I'll tell you, my favorite part of the interview was when you just whipped out the fucking Alex Jones gay frogs thing. And I was like, yo, we're going there?
No,
I was not expecting it.
That wasn't even Alex Jones.
Yeah.
That was a PhD that's been talking to Stephen Gunn.
I know, but it gets labeled with him. Our old intro, you had the Alex Jones clip where he was in a frog suit and he was like hopping and he was like I'm a gay frog to thank my daddy atrazine. I really do appreciate you guys coming. I do. It's I get I've done a lot of debates against TRAs. I've spoken to some D-trans people and stuff. Fucking, I don't know how this is the space I fell in the libertarian channel, but it's the culture war. It happens, and I'm glad to have someone that kind of, there's some disagreement, there's some agreement, but isn't radical in one way or the other.
No.
I appreciate you guys coming.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So definitely check out their channel, guys. It's Transition Radio. If you just put in the YouTube search bar, you'll find that, or you can scroll up and find the link as well.
All right, guys.
You have a great night.
You too. Take care.
You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.